Hello, people. This week I read The Cretaceous Past by Cian Liu. Cian Liu? Apologies. I'm not saying his name right. This is the author who wrote The Three Body Problem. Now, that's a fantastic book. I say book and not series because I haven't actually read the entire series. I want to, but I haven't. But the one book was tremendous. I recommend it highly. And I figured, if this is by him, I'll give it a go. This is a very surprising book to me. I did not expect it to hit as hard as I did. I should have, seeing how he's a good author. I just didn't. I'm trying to think of who I think would like this book. I think if you like dinosaurs, if you like history, you will like this book. And if you don't hate science fiction, right? So those sort of, if you're in one of those camps, I think you'll have something you'll like in here. I'm trying to think if I would recommend it to a casual. I might not. I wouldn't. But a kid can read it. Again, if the kid's into dinosaurs or science fiction. But I wouldn't recommend it to casuals. I say history and science fiction people would like this. That it reads an awful lot like a history book would. If you'll get a real history book, not like a textbook, history book. What the historians do is they'll grab a bunch of information or new information and then sort of like collect it out on the table. This is the breadth of their knowledge, so to speak. And individually, the items might not tell you anything, but collectively you start to see, and then the historian with their expertise, knowing if you see a bunch of Roman stuff, you don't assume that they ate with chopsticks. They're not Chinese. They're this kind of energy. And they'll piece things together in a kind of a way. Then they'll relay that to you. And then you absorb it and you're going to form an opinion on it. This book reads a lot like that. It feels like someone somewhere has found a bunch of clues and now can bring me this story of what happened in the past. So we go back to the Cretaceous period and we follow a dinosaur, a T-Rex. Just going about his day. It says you can't actually determine what day it was. I'm like, obviously. 60 million years ago. How would I know? But then I'm like, would the Mayan calendar actually be able to tell me what day this was? Because I feel like theirs is linked to astronomy more, right? Isn't it? So the planets can line up, and then there's deviations from each lineup. And so that could track 60 million years a lot easier and accurately. I think. I'm not sure. It's not part of the story. I'm just brainstorming. The T-Rex does what T-Rexes do. He finds something to eat and he eats it. Some kind of a lizard. And at the same time, there's a town of ants. He says that's what he calls it, a town of ants. And they're watching. The T-Rex moves around. It's like earthquakes to them. No one got hurt. And this was essentially the premise, the sort of the catch line of the book. This situation. He gets a piece of lizard stuck in his tooth. In between his teeth. It's very uncomfortable. He's not happy. Then the ants are waiting under where he eats because, the crumbs of what he eats falls down to them and it's just like a banquet. But no crumbs fall, so they're a little disappointed. So they watch him. He goes to the shade, lays down. But he can't go to sleep because of his teeth. At that moment, the ant mayor just has a brilliant idea. To go over there, go in his teeth and pick out some of the dino meat. For them, for the size of the ants, even the bit stuck in his teeth would be a massive meal. So that's what they do. That's the premise of this book. He crawls in. This interaction then leads to the rest of our story. I didn't know how long it'd take to get there. We got there within like 2-3 pages. The T-Rex lets the ants in his mouth. They go in, and it's adventurous for them from the ant's perspective. You know, even his skin is this moonscape of you know, pits and valleys and this and that. They go in his mouth, the sky's completely blotted out, except for these large ivory peaks. You know what I mean? They crawl around the teeth. Some 200 or 300 of them, you know, pick the food out or whatever the number was, and they all leave, and it's all fantastic. And already this far in, I'm a little bit happy because, like I said, we blend this story in and out of history and science fiction. So when he's saying that ants communicate chemically, they do. They use pheromones or something, right? When they say this mayor and these ants are traversing, there's this torrent of wind and this void of darkness that's the back of the throat and a respiratory system, right? Those are scientific, but then that's also, you cut to, these are like explorers. You know what I mean? It really gives that energy of, like, if you read conquistadors going through Brazil or something, it gives me that kind of feel when you cut to the ants. So you already start to get kind of partial to them. And the conceit, right? The thing that I have to agree to isn't that big a deal. Animals have, you know, what do they call them? Symbiotic relationships all the time, where the one fish will eat the bacteria off the bigger whale or whatever the case may be. This kind of thing, right? So he's treating history, which is sometimes the case, right? Where there are these options, these things that can happen, these random chance moments. That if that random chance is nurtured and lucky, right? So just for instance, you could have had, if that first lizard who came up out of the goop had got hit by an asteroid, then maybe evolution takes a different turn and we're all like aquatic people or something, right? This kind of conceit it's trying to lean on. But you have read those if you've read other history books and dinosaur books and things like this. It reads a lot like those. So you connect that in your head. The very fun. Our T-Rex is very happy. And the next day he comes and he brings 3 other dinosaurs. Because apparently he spread the word that, you know, this sort of thing can happen. And that's the start. That is the root moment when when a civilization can start. Just a small interaction that then balloons out. And that's what the rest of the story is the ballooning out of this interaction. And it's really done in the funnest, best way possible. An ant town springs up, obviously, because with 3 dinosaurs, there's not enough in the one ant town, so they get more from help. They get more help, and it all starts to, the ants bunch up, the dinosaurs clear space out, and we start to have more of this interaction. So this is the roots of civilization. An interaction happens, and then we see what thousands of years can do to that interaction. After so many years, or some amount of time, probably not too long, a dinosaur comes that doesn't just want his teeth cleaned. He has some other issue. Some, what they say, tooth decay. This is a step up. A step up from just teeth cleaning. Tooth decay. So, an ant mayor goes in to try and figure out what's the problem. He's looking around. He finds huge holes in the teeth. They're like caves to these ants. And out pops a worm, bites the mayor's head off. And I'm like, dang, Mare got it, right? It's a huge battle. Lots of ants dies, but two of them get away with the with the mare's head. And they're like, the head can survive a X amount of time, not attached to the body, which again feels like one of those real facts about ants. I haven't done a deep dive into ants. I can't be sure, but it feels like it. I think that's all that I need. It really dips in and out of those facts and not facts. It's very fun. The It gives it this realism on its backbone. I'll mention it a bunch. Anyway, the mayor's telling them, like, look, there's these huge worms in there. We got to go kill them. And, that's the mission. They all agree. They go in. And it's, a battle of the ages. These worms are huge. They're chopping ants in half. The ants are fighting as best they can. There's more than one of the worms because that's what I was going to say. This also feels like, because it's twofold, right? It's the insects and the dinosaurs. I feel like, I can't remember for certain, but it feels like I could have remembered seeing someone finding dinosaur bones with the teeth attached. And then on those teeth, they get evidence of parasites in the teeth. Right? That feels like a thing that I remember. I'm not sure if I do actually remember it. Like if it actually happened. But it feels like it could be a thing. So we're taking these moments from, I guess, archaeology and just give it a little sauce here. They eventually beat the worms by shooting some kind of acid at them. Some of the ants have acid they shoot out. Victory. They haul out the bodies. All the other dinosaurs are looking like, whoa, he's pulling these things out your teeth, bro. And then the guy is very happy because his teeth feel better because worms aren't eating them. So by this time, the numbers have grown. There are numerous dinosaurs who come here regularly for teeth cleaning and deworming of their teeth. The ant town swelled up to 1 million or more. They have a central building called the Ivory Citadel. This is like the center of all antdom, I guess. The highest of all the ants. And it really gives you that like was it like a butterfly effect or something where we now are curing, I say curing, they're just getting rid of worms and keeping teeth cleaner. Just that. Just that can extend life, right? So if you never brush your teeth, you're probably going to die, I don't know, like 20, 30 years sooner than people who do clean it. Maybe I'm exaggerating the number. Maybe I'm not. I've seen different studies. In any case, you'll live longer with clean teeth than not clean teeth. Well, we're applying the same concept now, but they're to dinosaurs. So a dinosaur that would have died is now moving in the world where he wouldn't have been moving, right? He's living longer than he would have. What happens with those extra interactions? What happens with that extra time? Sort of the first change, I think, comes to the ants because they get their Ivory Citadel first. They're now not having to hunt for food. They're having a higher supply. Ants are already communicative. And he's just assuming this communication, generations of it, turns into what we get, which is a step now above teeth cleaning. One of the Daba, our first named ant, the mess just tickles me to no end, decides to go check down in the void, right? I'm going to follow the tongue down, which is just, again, they're all just large moon landscapes to these ants because how small is an ant? How big is a dinosaur? So they just take an expedition down into the throat. And there's, of course, 2 maws, one being the respiratory, one being the digestive system. They try the respiratory first, cough, irritation, cough. That ain't happening today. Next expedition, they decide to take the one down the throat. They're making their way. Dinosaur, which, dinosaur doesn't know what's going on. He can't really tell bugs are crawling in his mouth. goes to drink some water. The expedition gets washed down and into the stomach. Now, again, if you're a kid or just a kid that's interested, these are sort of great descriptions of internal workings sometimes. You will end up later with, the brain cavity, the ear cavity. But here we start with the stomach. And now we're getting a description of the inside of a stomach of a dinosaur from an ant. So it's feeding the science, because some of these are just facts. And then it's feeding the story, because my Daba and Expedition are in there. Now, what's in the stomach? We all know. It's stomach acid. Some of the ants die. Some lose their nerve. Some start losing legs. Feet, I believe. They irritate the stomach, get upchucked, become heroes. And this starts what they call the age of exploration for ants, where they set about crawling in and out and all throughout these huge, to them, city-sized dinosaurs to see what they can see and make studies and make notes and see what they can learn. So then they graduate, all right? They've studied corpses of dead dinosaurs who show up at time to time. And they've studied living ones like they can. But until this one, they say a Hadrosaurus. A Hadrosaurus named Elijah comes and asks specifically, something up with my stomach, bro. He has a fun moment where, like, a Stegosaurus, what did he say, a Tarbosaurus and a T-Rex are gossiping. Like, bro, I'm not going to let bugs in my mouth, in my stomach. And they're like, what's the big deal? They're in your mouth and they clean it. It's not that big a deal. He's like, it's creepy. The ants go in and find some kind of a stomach lesion of some sort. And for a while now, they've been using various, like a plant put an ant to sleep. So they gather this plant up in large numbers and will put it in a tooth hole to ease tooth pain. That same idea then in a lesion inside the stomach. Right? I need, what is it? It might just reduce swelling or inflammation. That little bit of medicine can actually save a life, right? And now again, it's the same butterfly effect. What would happen if these lives were just extended that little bit from no medicine whatsoever to just some applied? What ends up happening is Boulder City. This is what the dinosaurs made. They've been hanging around here long enough that they decide, let's build a city. They build huge towers because they're dinosaurs. How do they fit in it? But then you're like, that seems too much of a step. But it sort of isn't. If we follow the same theme we've been following, they're big dinosaurs and they just wander around. And when it rains or storms, they just run in a cave or hide under trees, right? So there's the concept of not wanting the rain over here. They have that. They have now this extra time. Years have passed. And they say, I don't want to leave this spot now because here's where the ants are. And enough dinosaurs come that I'm going to make it work. But it's not where the shade or the shelter is. And then so I'm assuming they're primitive at first. Sort of huts, sort of lean-to setups so that we're out of the rain. And that eventually graduates naturally to brick, stone, some kind of stone building. That's what they end up making. Our author gets to this point and then says that this is just a symbiotic sort of relationship. That we might need more, civilization might need even more to get to where, for the actual growth of a civilization, right? So he says what they need is coevolution. They need some way where both of them are bounded together. Because if you think about it, the dinosaurs could just evolve, live longer, and then just get better immune systems. And then they'd traverse their way and forget about the ants. He says what ends up happening in his story is that the dinosaurs ride on huge tablets. They scrape with their claws a rudimentary language that they can read. They keep various records that they feel they need to keep. But one day, one of them wants it done quicker, and he asks, with just motion now. He's asking ants to transcribe his tablets. Now they do, but they're ants. So they just get onto I think he has a piece of wood. And they just dig out what they need to dig out for it to be the letter. And what they end up finding is, ants can do this easily. They can do whole letters at a time, right? Because they get, what is it? They work well as a unit. And they're like, it's tiny compared to what he wrote. Just minuscule. But he can still clearly read it. And this is a jump, a revolution. So I can go from these big dumb tablets to small strips of leather. Everything written on it. I can carry this large record just sort of on my back, in my pocket or whatever. And so they get the ants to start literally writing for them. And again, everyone I think of as examples ends up finding some other example in history where if we have 12 different clans of primitive humans, the one clan that started writing gets stat bonuses, so to speak, in the evolutionary game. Information has this value that then makes them more durable, and then they withstand sort of the winds of chaos that come and eat away at whatever race is trying to come up through the evolutionary scale. And writing's always been one of the big key factors. Even, the printing press, hugely revolutionary. Your cuneiform tablets, all the greats have to have a written language, and they always end up doing better. And so now our author's imagining what would happen if these two, because eventually, right, the ants are going to figure out what's written on here. And now I have two cultures that can communicate with each other, which is what ends up happening. You have this setup where I'm writing your language and you're needing things written. And then we slap 1,000 years on it. Easily we have that amount of time. 1,000 years. And by 1,000 years, the ants can understand when a dinosaur talks. Obviously, the dinosaur can't understand the ant because it talks with pheromones. So what it does is it'll bring 2,000, 10,000 other ants, royal ants, and they've practiced moving in formation. So it'll make a word or a small note, and it's just like it's like a teleprompter, but ants shifting around. I'm like, this is just cool technology. Now these dinosaurs are talking to these ants. We go from there and we jump to the steam age, which is, again, there's another side fun to this book, and we get it here because it's been 1,000+ years or more probably since these two have interacted. It's obviously bumped them up in the evolutionary chain. And I have dinosaurs in massive dino-sized steam cars and steam planes. And they're living in huge steam-powered cities. I mean, that's just hilarious to me. It's like, what is it, the Flintstones or whatever that other old show was in the 90s, where it's just like a dino civilization, but they're still just dinosaurs. It's just hilarious. And that's what they have. They have printing press. They have cars. I do at this point wonder why we didn't get more interactions from other insects, right? neither side decides to bring in different insects. Like, you don't think the ants could work and talk with wasps? And then I'd have like an air force? Or, talk to a salamander or something? I don't know. We never brought anything else in, not a spider, it's just these two. Which I'm like, I mean, I guess it works out. We just sort of glaze over it. We never give a real reason why we wouldn't talk to other insects. But they don't. Here comes our first big issue, because we have coevolution. But sort of any civilization in human history has always had the ability to merge into one civilization, right? So if Romans take over a Persian city, eventually it becomes a sort of a unified city, because the Romans can take Persian wives and then they have kids, and you do that enough, and who even knows what the line is? My kids have been here for 4 generations. I'm Persian and Roman. And now Roman's a new thing and Persian's a new thing, right? But we have ants and dinosaurs, and they physically can't do that. They can't intermarry. They can't intercommunicate, because dinosaurs were never going to evolve the ability to speak with pheromones, because why would you? I have a printing press. Vice versa to the ants. They're not gonna stop using pheromones to speak. It's just a divide. It's just, here's a hard line that can't be crossed. And that divide manifests eventually in religion. The first big divide is, they say, the shape of God. So an argument about the beginning of all things either hasn't come up or isn't part of a story he wants to tell, because he wants a twin sort of subject matter. Something that could feed my story about these animals who were making a civilization in the Cretaceous period, and sort of have a commentary on us today. Us today being humans, and if we haven't had our fair share of wars about God. That's what they do. Ants say God's clearly in the shape of an ant. Dinosaurs say God's clearly in the shape of a dinosaur. And they go to war. And this is your great commentary on wars. Both sides are very almost eager for the fight. Both sides underestimate the ability of the other ones, overestimate sort of their own abilities, and drastically underestimate the cost in lives and the time it will take, right? If that doesn't describe World War I, nothing does. Dinosaurs clearly have the size, but ants are small. And there's a lot of them. Ants do what you figure, what you figure they will do. Neither fights a modern war. Your first thought is, right, like, if I'm an ant, I'm sneaking in the middle of the night. They're like, no, we're fighting honorably. Both sides. And if you think you're a dinosaur, you're like, I'm going to run over there, smash their town, and come back. They pick an appointed day. They line up facing each other. And they say, we're going to go to war. Obviously, the dinosaurs make it to the ant town and destroy it. It's very rough. Told from an ant's perspective, it's impactful. You feel the how it would be to see something that you thought would be forever demolished right in front of your eyes as an ant soldier hanging on this dinosaur. Now, for the dinosaurs, clearly we know what's going to happen. The ants catapult themselves onto the dinosaur, crawl into the ear or the nose, and start snipping wires. Those wires being spinal cords, or, what is it? Ocular ocular freaking nerves and whatnot. They're getting blind. They're falling over dead. And the book doesn't, but I definitely did stop and think about the impossibility of having a war with the insect kingdom. Like if we had to fight all the insects, humanity would die, pretty much. If they were actively trying to kill us, right? Which may be why he didn't pick a whole bunch of insects. But let's just say one. Let's just say something happened and the ants are now talking to each other and they've decided to go to war with humanity. That would still be a hard fight. How would you ever kill them all? They can take, was it 3-4 feet of land and grow another 1,000,000-man army? They could just swarm in. The poisons alone could kill a bunch of people. Not to mention, like this, the little ones crawling up in your brain. I mean, there's a hole right here, right? I'm thinking like ant lobotomies, which is what they were doing to these dinosaurs. Just crawl right in the nose, right to the membranes back there. Cut my way into that. Now there's the brain, and I'm gonna just bite stuff until you die. It's very almost horror level stuff. But then you're like, how can we do anything to their towns? If they can just keep us out, if they can keep the ants out of town, they're just gonna win out, right? Wrong. Because how do you keep ants out of your house if they really want it in? They're sneaking in. What these ants do is they sneak in and they have, because they've been messing with chemicals, sort of a rice-shaped, what he calls them, a mine grain, which is just like migraine. It's kind of funny, but it's a mine that explodes when hit with some ant acid. That part just clicked to me. Migraine and ant acid. Okay. Those are side jokes for me. The ants then set these little mines all over town on anything they think will burn. And they set them off at the same time. So dude wakes up and half his army died from, ants eating out their brain stems. And then his whole town's on fire with 10,000 fires all at once. Just lit up. Just everything's on fire. And the war goes on in this manner for some 5 years until the Ant Queen and the Emperor of the Dinosaurs meet in this burned out dino town. And then they're like, I'm starting to think God doesn't have to look like a dinosaur or an ant. It can be whatever he wants. A gust of wind, a ray of light. He's all shapes that he wants. And the ant's like, I think that's a good idea. And so ends the ant war. And they sort of unify. We get to a more modern age. Does he call it the information age? I didn't write down the chapter name. My apologies. But we get to essentially what is a modern age. So, now again, the same fun as before, only just cranked up to 11. Okay? Imagine New York City, but everyone in it's a dinosaur. And not like, he doesn't say it, they're not shrunken down dinosaurs, right? Which I think if you looked at evolution, if you gave it 10,000 years or some mess, I think dinosaurs would shrink a little bit. But maybe not. In this story, they don't, right? So it's a skyscraper that just goes up into the clouds, and dinosaurs live in it. Just up on the 80th floor or whatever. They have huge dino boats. They have huge dino planes. It's the full meal deal. Everything that's small, everything that needs detail is ant related. So when the dinosaurs think of a computer, the ants are the ones that are sort of making the circuits and putting them in place. And then the dinos, just with their claws, type away on massive keyboards. And then on the world goes. If I'm making an internal combustion engine, I'll bring the iron and I'm smelting it. But you're hooking up the wire, right? All the little things are there, just ants doing it. And this has gotten them to this stage, to the nuclear stage. This part's very science fiction-y to me. Because now he just talks about the dino stuff, but it's essentially our stuff. But the ant stuff isn't essentially ours. The ant stuff, they have, the little pinwheel windmills. They have those as air turbines, as wind turbines. I mean, they have solar panels, helping to make their cities efficient. But the really cool thing that I liked is he said they had a thing called bioengineered locomotive muscle. So it's manufactured tissue, muscle fiber, that then you feed nutrients and get it to contract. And that, instead of an internal combustion fire, because they're ants and they're small, this gives them the engines that power their planes and their little inner cities and whatnot. He says they have tiny rice-grained computers that don't have any internal circuitry. That all the circuitry is chemical. And I'm like, that's genius. I think because we're getting down to with the circuit board, right? What is the computer chip? The main processing one. It's just ones and zeros. It's on and off. And they're getting to where they can lay a single layer of a molecule, right? Whatever the molecule is, a single layer of them, and then positively and negatively charge them so that they then become the on-off switches. So we're getting down to like very, very microscopic computing. And I think of that in the sense of, here's a race that speaks through chemicals. They'd be acquainted with them. They'd have time to work on them. And they came up with purely chemical sort of circuit boards. That would work highly. I mean, if you could get it to work, it'd be very efficient. Storage would be outrageous. And they said it didn't have any screens. Their output of this machine is pheromones, and it speaks to them in this pheromone language, and they're networked via pheromone as well. I mean, that part gets very like heavy science fiction-y. That part is very cool to me. I'm just thinking about the ant civilization and all the things they could get done. It's very, to me, I'm like, oof, we got actual science fiction over here. We get to basically a UN assembly. The main races on this planet, the main civilizations on Earth at this time, is the Ant Federation. They're completely unified. All ants all over the world unified under one banner. The dinosaurs are in two main factions. The Gondwanan Empire, which is mostly T-Rexes. And the Laurasian Republic. So he takes the main two continents and essentially turns them into two different sort of peoples. And they're mostly Tarbosauruses. Mostly rule Laurasia. And again, this makes sense to me. Ants would be unified. They always are. They know how to work together. But if the history of us is, you were a T-Rex and you ate others of my kind, it's going to be hard to bridge the gap, and it'll at least instill some amount of prejudice. And, prejudice grows into issues. They've had constant wars between the two of them over the millennia here. And what stopped it essentially was nuclear deterrence. They both get nukes. They don't want to implode the world. So they got to stop. But they're right at each other's throats. And the ants come to the delegation and they're like, this is ridiculous. The world could end under nuclear devastation, which we would have no part of, but we'd suffer from it as ants. And two, y'all are eating too much stuff. So there's going to be too many dinosaurs in a minute. There's too much pollution. Now, again, that sounds like it should be preachy, woke stuff. It isn't. It works with these characters. So don't, this book doesn't preach to you a lot. It's just stating this. Now, I will say at this point, ants are a little bit ridiculous. The ants want, obviously, nuclear deproliferation. They also want forced constrictions on the dinosaurs, meaning you'll stop expanding production. They also want birth rates controlled. So they're not asking that, you kill off a bunch of people, but at a certain point you stop letting dinosaurs produce more dinosaurs. And I'm like, and you asking quite a bit here. Mind you, they are sort of civilization equals, but that was never going to fly, right? You asking way too much. I started at this point to wonder about them and then sort of naturally towards us, because the book leads you always back in this sort of manner. But I'm like, the dinosaurs would fill up the space a lot faster than we have. So if they got to a comparable technological tree as us, and they're at 7 billion or 12 or whatever the number is now, then it wouldn't be not a lot of space, because you're building massive dino houses and just churning out massive dino industries. You might run out of space, but there's literally also outer space. And you wonder when that becomes, instead of an option, like this, when does that become necessary? When on Earth will things get so bad or so congested or so polluted, whatever you want to say, that we actually look out and try and find a planet? We'll land on the moon, right? We'll go to the moon and try and build it out into a huge colony. We'll go to Jupiter. It's got to be some rocks that we can live on. The dinosaurs don't. I think for them, because they're in this sort of contentious state, they never really thought, and I think because the ants brought the point up too soon. We, just like we're not going to change until sort of we have to. That's just the nature of the beast. You can have all the good ideas you want, but unless change is forced, we're not going to. And forced meaning people are dying, right? So the dinosaurs like, I'm not going to hunt for another planet and expend all that and get, a surprise attack and not have an army to defend my kingdom. This is the energy they go with. So they don't actually look out into space for a solution. What is it? The ants' leader is Supreme Consul Kachia. The Laurasian president is Dodame, a Tarbosaurus, and the Gondwanan emperor is Dadios, a T-Rex. I mention their names because the chunk end of the book deals with them, and they are personable, right? That you relate, you start to care, you get invested fairly quickly now. And I think it's because you see sort of them as representations of this mini journey you've been on through the ages with the two races. And in the kind of the back of your head, you're like, I kind of know how the dinosaur story ends, and I'm not wanting to be off this ride yet, but we're barreling towards it. The ants decide to go on strike. This lasts very shortly when one of their towns is attacked. It's been a long, of course, they have technology, so you're not going to crawl in our brains like you used to and kill us. You're not going to burn our towns. You have no way to win. We're the dominant empire, and you should just, accept that we're in this together and find a different way. And the ants sort of agree after the one attack, but they don't ever really agree. They decide to launch a full-scale subterranean war against the dinosaurs. They want to end it all in one big go, right? And only one of them brings up sort of the ant conundrum. The ant conundrum being that they live shorter lives, but they're also more tied to each other, right? So the group handles so many individual needs. The outcome of group effort is individual needs are taken care of. But without the individual sort of need, creativity is hampered. Dinosaurs walking around are the ones with the creativity. They're the ones who say a computer would be a cool thing to have. And then they work and their idea helps make the thing reality, right? So the ants would never have thought to make a computer because they don't need them. The dinosaur did need them. Now the ants have them because that creativity was there. And this one ant, what's her name? Julia, I believe, was very concerned that, we're cutting off our nose to spite our face here. But she gets drowned out by, ant senators, which senators will always be a bad thing. When the world ends, it'll be senators' fault. Big windbags. Their plan is to. They have now, of course, new mine grain bombs that wrap like tape and change color. So they're going to wrap wires on basically everything that they have access to, which is everything because they're the tiny hands that fix it all. Every car, every plane, every internal microphone system, every communication system. It'll be like an EMP going off in a modern world. And what if the big solar flare happens and none of our electronics works? This kind of energy, all of it going down all at once and no ants there to refix it. On top of that, they want to put bombs, they want to sneak in and put bombs in the heads of every dinosaur government official. And then time them all to go off at the same time. So, just when you need leadership, all the leaders are dead. About 5 million dinosaurs would die instantly. And none of the towns would work. And they're like, of course, the population can't function without the town working, so a certain number will then die off. The rest will spill out of the towns. They'll lose cohesion, and they'll, evolve backwards in time, so to speak. That's the ants' plan. In the course of this plan, Julia, who's trying to find some, way to stop it, because she's nervous about it, starts a spy program. And in her espionage, she overhears 2 key phrases. What is it? Bright moon and emperor of the sea. And in these hidden conversations, the dinosaurs are more scared of these 2 things than an ant strike. And that gets her worried. You're like, the ants should be the biggest deal for them, but it's not. We ant people are missing something. She YOLOs in. She's like, I'm just going to go ask him directly. In the course of her going, 2 ants soldiers see her and, of course, report. She's sure, this intuition tells her that something could be bad about these 2 things. So she goes in and talks to the leaders, and she's like, I have something I could tell you that could help. It'd be drastic. They're not going to tell you until you tell me what Bright Moon and Emperor of the Sea are. And, in her head, that if it's not anything, she'll just let them kill her, and the ants' plan will go through. And if it is something, she'll try and warn them or stop them, right? So she's not exactly a traitor, but they see her, the ants see her as a traitor. They freak out, hit the red button sooner than they needed to. And again, we get into science fiction again here. What these things are is, a number of years ago, there was a massive explosion in the sky. Everyone sees it. That explosion no one could explain, or at least no one explained to the ants. Dino scientists found out that that explosion turned out to be um, a blast in the hole of the antimatter body. Antimatter explosion. And there are now bits of antimatter floating around. More studies show that the antimatter is anti-iron. And so it can be affected by magnets. So that the dinosaurs of Gondwana make a ship, go out into space, and with this sphere, grab a piece of antimatter, suspend it in the sphere with magnets, and then make it, a vacuum. So we suck everything else out. So there's nothing in it but this antimatter piece of anti-iron. And there's a sphere. And they bring it down to Earth. Now the problem with this is, if antimatter touches matter, it's just like a super nuclear explosion. Like it could end the world. That's how they see it. The world could end if this piece that they brought down even touches the side of the container that it's holding in it. They get this antimatter and they put it on a boat. And they sail the boat to a Laurasian port. Boat's called Emperor of the Sea. And they just leave it there. And obviously the Laurasians aren't going to go anywhere near it. They're like, if I mess with it, if I poke it, anything could just jostle this thing and drop this antimatter. And the Gondwanans, very happy. They now have the upper hand, start making all kind of demands, even though it's semi-ridiculous, right? Like to say, I'll destroy the earth unless. They have the power, and it's too much of a risk to say no, so they're winning in their minds. The Laurasians aren't going to sit back and do nothing. They get a spaceship. They go get a piece. They bring it down to Earth, the same manner. And they put it on a boat called Emperor of the Sea. They drive it to Gondwanan port. Leave it there. So now I have sort of an antimatter bomb on one side of the world and an antimatter bomb on the other side of the world. Now, what would you do if you have sort of this doomsday device? Would you leave it so it could get taken over by the enemy? Not if you're suspicious to no end, which doesn't that sound familiar? The dinos do what we would do. Dead man switch. If something happens and the Gondwanan Empire is gone, then this message won't get sent to this little facility, hidden. And those soldiers won't hit these buttons that send a message to the boat to re-up the cycle, right? If the cycle stops, the nuclear generator turns off, it turns off, the magnetic field turns off, your piece of anti-iron drops, touches matter, explodo, right? That's where we're at. This is what is it? Bay of Pigs, when we're all just looking at thumbs on the nuclear button in the end of the world, as two dumb boats are driving to Cuba, right? This is where we're at. We're gonna be here again. Somebody's gonna do it again, right? There's no way. This is the nightmare Oppenheimer's having at the end of that movie. If you've seen it, if you haven't seen it, go watch. It's pretty good. And this is what is it? Because we're thinking of the ages. This is that moment. This is that you've run out of luck. The chips don't fall your way moment, right? So if lightning had struck that salamander coming out, humanity then becomes aqua people. But it didn't. And it set up here instead of there, when there was flooded out, and the next cycle in evolution is saved. Always saved cosmically, right? Just missing. just diverse enough to not all die to a potato blight. Just something, right? Enough of us live on the equator, we survive the ice age, etc., etc., etc. Well, this is the moment where all of that luck runs out, right? Because you're like, there's nothing to worry about. This is what the dinosaurs were thinking. Because neither of us are going to set off these bombs. At some point, we'll think, let's drive them back into space and not do this again. But, it would take somebody, I don't know, putting the bomb in the head of every dinosaur. And putting a bomb in every piece of equipment to go off all at the same time, right? But there's still time, right? It's not like anything's panicked the ants and they've set off all the bombs sooner, right? That didn't happen. It's exactly what happens. This information is learned at exactly the wrong time to exactly the worst outcome you could have. So instead of waiting the normal time, and Julia would have come back to the ant kingdom and told them X, Y, Z, and then they would have undone what they did. They panicked. They hit the button. They killed all the dinosaurs. Or all the government officials, they set off their trap. There's a bit of a battle for the facility. Like, maybe if we can get to the facility in time, we can turn on the device and send the message. But that wouldn't have worked either because they don't have the right code that makes the message work. In any case, they can't. Because in the battle, the guys used up all the gas that would power the facility to even send the message, trying to fight off the ants. And while when they trust the ants, they just got attacked and all their world leaders died. And it's just like, yep, there it is. You did it now. The ants try and dig deep before the hour and a half runs out. Boom. The two things go off and they're just like suns on the horizon. Right? And then you're like, oh, well, he's using the asteroids, right? They're like, we think it's an asteroid that killed all the dinosaurs. He's like, nah, it was these two antimatter bombs that just wiped out not only the dinosaurs, but a complete dino civilization that had already had a space age. And then 40 million years of erosion just washes it all away. And all we have, the bones we have are, the remnants of when they say nuclear holocaust and then the T-1000's picking up a skull and crushing it. That's what we're looking at. We're not looking at, the bones of wandering animals. We're looking at innocent civilian victims who died. He didn't say any of this, but it's just the image is just there to be seen. The image is just all these dino victims who had a great society and it all got ruined because their world leaders were too stupid and played with toys they didn't know how to work. And that's how the book ends. We get sort of an epilogue where the ants are trying, right, to sustain it, but all their connection was tied to these dinosaurs as well. They don't have there's not enough food now because it's a nuclear winter. They start being disconnected from one another. Their lives are short, so their generations are coming up who the dino society was a myth and it hadn't been, 200 years. So eventually it's all just gonna go away. And then humanity is gonna come and we're gonna see ants and they're just ants. We don't know anything about this great history. And that's how it hits me, right? What do they have? They have something called headcanon. That is where in your mind you make a story and you tie it in ways that you want, right? So in my headcanon, the guy who plays Data is Data. So if I see him in Independence Day, I'm like, well, that's just Data in a different suit who's pretending to die to the aliens, right? This kind of energy. I do this all the time. I see an actor that was in one thing and I'm like, and then he shows up in another thing. I'm like, oh, I guess he somehow lived from the dinosaurs and moved to New Jersey, right? I do this all the time. I can't help it. It's so fun. This story, this story is seared into my head canon of the Cretaceous Age. From now on, from now till forever. There's not a time when I'll look at dinosaurs and not think of the great Gondwanan Empire and the great ivory tower of the ants. There's not a single time from now till I die I won't think of this story when I look at dinosaurs. That's how good this story is. It's so creative to get such a small beginning, just one tiny interaction, and to balloon it into this thing, and then to wrap it all up, and then just move on. It's just such a genius story. It's not overly long, but it hits. It really does hit. So I was sad at the end of it. I'm sad talking about it. In my mind, I'm like, if y'all idiots wouldn't have done it, imagine how humanity would have integrated into the dino ant kingdom. We'd have had faster than light travel by now. It's such a fantastic book. It's such fantastic science fiction, science, history. It's just so good. Again, I'm never going to not think about this. But that's how it ends. There's no ant kingdom. They blew it up, people. You blew it up. All right. Ad time. These are my books. I don't have any books about ants. But my books are fun. You can buy them. Buying them will help the channel. You can also get Kindle Unlimited. Now, I don't get money for you getting Kindle Unlimited. But I think like Spotify, I'll get some cheddar if you read my books. So that could be a good way for you to read them, and then you don't have to risk not liking them because you have this package for a month or two, and you read other books, and you'll get value out of it. It's a decent value. And then if you like my books, you can just go buy them later. But that's how you help this channel. That's what we're here for. But if you don't want to buy them, that's still fine. You can just keep watching. Okay, people. I'm going to go cry about the Dino Kingdom I lost. I will talk to you all next week.